We are back. Welcome back to the Women Wise podcast.
A new week, right? I just like jamming. I'm still jamming.
I know. I love that tune. I was going to change it, but I was like, no, I think we're going to keep it for this season as well. So for those of you who have not joined this podcast before, I am your co-host, Sara Haboubi, and this is my amazing co-host, Janine Lingenfelder. Janine, how are you doing?
I am doing so great. Hi, everyone. So excited to be here tonight. And just a quick reminder for everyone what our mission is with Women Wise podcast. It's really all about empowering, inspiring Dubai's dynamic women and really sharing stories, celebrating achievements, and creating change. And I'm quite excited for tonight's ladies who's joining us tonight. So very excited, and I cannot stop smiling because it's a big topic, and I think it's going to change a lot of people's lives.
It's a huge topic, and her name is Joy, and what a joy it will be to have a chat with Joy. This is someone I've only just met recently, and she is dynamic. She is a force to be reckoned with, and she is an absolute phenomenal guest. And to celebrate, this is Dyslexia Awareness Week. Yesterday was International Dyslexia Day. Joy, welcome to the podcast.
Hi. I was in the background like dancing while you guys were bringing me in. How are you?
We're great.
Good.
We're great.
It's so nice to have you.
So thank you for having me. It's an honor.
It's absolutely our pleasure.
Really
so Joy,
good. Really good. Sorry.
Just before we went on air, we were chatting, and I was like, you were telling me something. I was like, hang on, I know so little about you. So I think you need to introduce yourself and give us a bit of background of who you are and how on earth did you get to be where you are today.
Okay, I'm more than happy. So my name's Joy Buckner. I am from Denver, Colorado. I grew up, born and raised in Denver. I have a twin sister, an older brother named Jay. My dad unfortunately passed away 9 years ago. And then I have my mother, Janet. They're probably watching now, so hello. I just grew up as like a typical like Colorado girl. Skiing and outdoor stuff. I had lots of struggles. We'll talk about that in a bit. So I'm dyslexic and just really struggled through school, but that kind of drove me to become a teacher. And so I was teaching, I taught in Washington, D.C. for the majority of my career in the States, and then came out of the classroom as like an instructional coach and literacy specialist. And that led me to Dubai 11 years ago. I came to Dubai to work for an international educational company here, worked for them for 7 years, and then transitioned out.
What were you doing for them? I'm just always curious how people get here.
Fine. So I originally came over as an instructional coach as well. Was working at an American school, and then my head of primary was Scottish, and her husband was the head of a British school. So he stole me and brought me over there. And I was a pastoral leader, so senior leadership on this side. And so worked across a few different schools in Dubai. And then I came out and started working for an ed tech company called Teacherly. So it was an online learning platform, and I worked for that for a year. And then that turned out to be a little bit of a disaster. The company folded, and I found myself in Dubai with you have to be tied to a visa. So no visa, no job. And I'm like, what do I do? And my friend Christine was like, listen, Joy, my husband was talking to me last night about you. And he told me like, Joy's a boss. Like she doesn't need to be a boss. So like, let's just help her be a boss. And she was like, you just need to start a consultancy. Like all you do is teacher training now anyway. Cause I was like, I was a professional development leader and school inspector and did tons of training. So she was like, just do that. And you can consult with my company. So during the pandemic, I started Buckner Education, which is a boutique style consultancy working with teachers. And I've been doing that ever since. So kind of from necessity, but I honestly think, like, I think like the universe sometimes is just like, you are not doing what you're supposed to do, and like rips the rug out from underneath you. And so that happened, and I fell into my consultancy. Yeah. So I've been doing that. So I was talking to you earlier, like, because you're asking about my gaming chair, which I absolutely love. But I do lots of different work. I work.
Everyone's going to want one. Everyone will want one at the end of this podcast.
It's the 100%. Best. So I do, like, I find little niche projects that I love, but typically that allow me to work with teachers or work with students around the world. So I don't just work in Dubai. I've worked in 25 different countries at this point, but mostly around learning innovation, teaching, school improvement, and of course, dyslexia. Yeah.
Janine, I thought you were going to jump in there. No, that is absolutely amazing. So one of the things we were discussing beforehand, because I was saying to you, okay, what would you like our audience to know? Yeah. And I think dyslexia for so many people is, even if they have a diagnosis themselves, is still a mystery.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So why don't you explain from your point of view, what does dyslexia mean for you? And, what are the upsides?
The upsides. So I've never really looked at my dyslexia as like a hindrance. I think that a lot of people do. I have parents who taught me, like, listen, it is what it is. You get what you get. You need to deal with it in the way that you deal with it. And I honestly think a dyslexic mind is the most fascinating, like, amazing mind. And so I've always just seen it as a gift. It wasn't always a gift that I wanted, and I had to kind of grow into appreciating it, but I've never been upset about being dyslexic. So I guess a little bit of a story. Earlier on Sunday, I went to an event with the amazing organization here, Distinct Learners, and there was a woman who was asking a lot of questions during the event, and you could tell that she was just really upset. And so I went to her afterwards, and I asked her, like, just some of the questions, I was going to talk to her about some of the questions, and she was talking about her son, and I asked, was her son dyslexic? And she looked at me just with like grief in her eyes and was like, unfortunately, yes, like really upset. And I said, it's not a bad thing. And she was like, I was like, it's a gift, and you have to look at it as a gift. And she was like, this was not a gift. Like, and you could tell that she was very resentful. And so if there's anything that I want people to take away from today, I want to be able to, in all the talks that I do and everyone that I speak to, I want to be able to humanize dyslexia and show that it is not a hindrance. It is not a bad thing. I live a perfectly normal life, and I'm extremely I hit the neurodivergence like jackpot. So I'm dyslexic. I have Erlen syndrome, which they used to say was dyslexia, but they're two different diagnoses. And haven't been formally diagnosed, but I know I have ADHD. So I have like the trifecta. And it hasn't hindered me. I have a master's degree. I graduated from college on time. I graduated from high school on time. I just did it in a different way. My path was different. And so I just want to really be able to show people that there's life beyond like that initial diagnosis. And there's our pathways. We get to the same point, but it's just our journey is a little bit different and more exciting, I would say.
It's remarkable.
I guess for the ordinary man on the street or woman, what would be some of the things then to look out for if, say, they're watching their children and they're thinking, I think there's something going on here, that they are struggling with maybe some of the basic things at school, like, I suppose, spelling or reading, or maybe their handwriting is pretty bad. I mean, what would you suggest as being kind of early indicators from both a negative and a positive? Like, what would they struggle with? But what else do you sort of see that you go, actually, that's those sort of two aspects of it, the gift and also some of the things they might struggle with?
So I can talk about what were kind of the indicators for me, and then from like an educator, what I've seen is kind of common that I see with dyslexic students. So for me, I was really, I was behind in reading and being able to, I just couldn't read. Like, I was able to mask it very well, but like my test scores were really low. I struggled with reading. I was really good at avoiding reading. My memory is insane. So like if people were like reading around me, like I could memorize what they were saying and then just kind of pick up and compensate. But I was really behind in my classwork all the time. I am the most atrocious speller to this day. I will never be a good speller. Handwriting was crazy. And I just was just not motivated and completely overwhelmed in school. I have a twin sister who was obviously the same age as me. And so we definitely weren't progressing at the same rate. I was definitely labeled as lazy, a bit of a behavior problem. And I'm not going to lie, I probably was a behavior problem. Like I really struggled. On top of that, my words moved. They jump up and down on the page. They would fall off the page like a waterfall, mix around like alphabet soup. But I didn't realize that no one else's words did that. So, and no one ever told me that they shouldn't.
Is that part of the Erlen syndrome then?
That's part of the Erlen syndrome. So I have a lot of difficulty to this day of white paper with black writing in fluorescent lights. I'm very sensitive to lights. So in the States, everything is fluorescent lights. The elementary school that I went to, like, it was kind of broken up into pods. So not all the classrooms had like windows and natural light. And so the fluorescent lights were even more amplified. And so I would get in so much trouble because I was like literally trying to stop my words from moving. So I would like be trying to hold my paper or like go off the side of the page, like trying to read it, and trying to unscramble my words and then read them. Cause like I knew what letters made what, in general, like what letters made what words. And I could sound things out, but I didn't know what it was supposed to look like. And I just assumed that everyone else's words looked like mine because no one told me that they weren't supposed to move. So I was constantly in trouble.
They didn't know. I guess they didn't know. They didn't know the right questions to ask.
No. And it wasn't until I was diagnosed and I got my lenses, because a lot of dyslexics are helped with like lenses that are colored or film over their paper to help with like that contrast between the black and the white. And so when I finally got my glasses, my books were in lines. And I told my father, I was like, Dad, my books it's like in lines. And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, my books are in lines. And he was like, all books are in lines. And so I asked him, I was like, is that why you write on like lines on paper? Like I literally wrote on the lines on the paper because all my friends did. It never occurred to me that my words were supposed to be organized in that way.
Oh, wow.
Because I'd never seen it. But even like on the Sunday, at the event on Sunday that I was talking about, I met a wonderful woman from Abu Dhabi, and she introduced me to her son. I think his name was Faris or Faisal. He's great. I asked him, I said, what do your words do? And he was just like, they move. Yeah. And his mom's eyes like lit up, and she was like, I didn't know your words moved. And he said, well, no one's ever asked me, but they move.
Because everyone assumes that what's happening for them is happening for everyone else. So there's because you don't know what's going on in someone else's mind.
So there was that. But I guess to go back to your question. So the other thing that was like when my mom had just had it, it's like I was having a lot of headaches, tons of headaches, getting sick all the time because I was just so anxious, like stomach problems, didn't want to go to school. But the thing that got my mother when she was just like, no, that's it, is I was so exhausted when I would come home from school. Like she would be able to get me home from school. She could maybe get some food in me. And then I was knocked out for the rest of the night. And she's like, this isn't normal. And I remember I was sleeping on the couch and a window, like they had just had like the windows cleaned, and a window fell over me, landed on the ground and like cracked and shattered. And I slept completely through it. And my mother was like, yeah, no, we are going to the doctor. Like and went to the school. And she was like, you need to figure out what is going on with her. Like, but by this, it was 5th grade when all this started happening. So I was really just kind of moved up through the ranks, through each grade level. And I didn't know at the time, but like, cause my father was an educator. He was a principal in the district where I was working and worked in the central office as well. So behind the scenes, like my parents were giving the school hell. Like, why is one twin doing this? Why is her teacher not helping. They never, to their credit, never allowed me to know that they were questioning what was going on, but they were really fighting for me behind the scenes. But no one could figure out what was going on with me. And finally, after all of that, my mom pushed and pushed and pushed. They finally got me to be evaluated. One thing about dyslexics is we're really intelligent. And so all of the testing that they were doing, I'm extremely my verbal skills are off the charts. And so everything that they were testing was like them asking me questions or giving me puzzles to put together, which I can do in like a second. So the test came back like, oh, she's really, really smart. Her verbal skills are off the charts. Let's put her in all advanced classes. And I literally shut down. And just could not function. Yeah.
Have you come across? Sorry, go on, Janine.
Yeah, sorry. I just want to say something. I've heard something about the fact that having dyslexia, it's often associated that you guys have, strong creativity skills as well as problem-solving skills, and you kind of mentioned that just now. So I think my question is, how have you used your creative and problem-solving skills in overcoming certain challenges and in your career?
Yeah,
can you maybe share some examples?
I think if I'm gonna look at my growing up, my schooling years, my parents were really good about I might have been struggling with schools, but they gave me so many outlets artistically. So I was in acting classes and I was in art classes and I played the cello and I got to do tons of things where I really got to flourish that weren't academic. Cello was still a difficulty because I couldn't read the music, but I could understand the numbers of it. So my orchestra teacher would literally go through on my sheet music and put numbers so I knew which fingers I needed to use because I couldn't read the music, but I was able to play. I always played sports. And so I was able to have a lot of success still during those years, but most of that was artistic. So I loved pottery. I know how to throw on the pottery wheel. I like to make jewelry, anything artistic. My mom and dad would encourage us to do. Problem solving, I'm not sure if I can explain how, but my mind just kind of figures things out. And I'm able to.
It just does what it's
it just happens. I don't know why. I don't know how. I also have crazy sense of directions, and I can visualize. Actually, when I met Sara, my mind was blown because I told her, I was like, I'm really an auditory learner, extremely auditory. And she was like, no, you're probably really visual, but just don't realize that you're really visual. And then as Sara was talking me through this and my mind was blown and she was talking me through all these things, I realized that I literally visualize everything. If I'm going anywhere, I can map out.
Apart from words,
spelling, I can't do spelling.
Because they were. Yeah, but you will. Don't worry, you will.
I'm gonna get there. I guess now that made me think of it. One other thing that's really characteristic of the way that my dyslexia presents itself, because everyone presents in so many different ways, it's really hard for me to sound out words, even as an adult. I love to read. You will never find me without a book, within reach. But I have a really hard time with sounding words out. What is that? I have no clue.
You mean the segmenting and blending?
Segmenting it. So if I look at a big, a name of a city or a word that I'm unfamiliar with, I can just stare at it and literally have no idea what the word is. And my brain does not figure out how to figure out what that word is. I typically will just go to Google, put it in, and then have Google say it to me. And then I can break it down. But I have a really difficult time with that. But I wish I could answer your question. I can't answer. I can solve most problems. I can come up with really creative ways to do it, but I don't know how my brain does it.
If you did, then you would need to teach everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that's great about neurodivergence in general, we're really good in a crisis or a hectic situation where everyone else is freaking out and we're just completely calm, unfazed.
And I know people, most of us can think out the box, but I think you guys just throw the box away and just do your thing. And I think that's, I love that, because I do think that you guys really think out the box without really thinking. It's just the doing that takes place, right?
Yeah. And I think it's just very hard. It's like, if I'm thinking of someone who is supporting someone who's neurodivergent, or like really doesn't understand the way our brain works, I think that that's a difficult thing to deal with. Like a difficult way to understand things. Like, I am so all over the place when I think of things. I'm sure to my friends, like my really good friends, are used to it, but I'm sure to people that are new to meeting me, like they probably think that I'm just a scatterbrain, because I really think in like chutes and ladders. I don't think in a straight line, or even like really segmented. So I think that that's kind of a difficult thing for people at times. And I can see how that would be difficult for someone who is helping someone that's neurodivergent.
I was going to say, I think for parents, when they have very bright children, they're fantastic verbally, they're normally really interested. When they're really interested in something, they'll know huge amounts about it and they can talk about it for days. Yeah. And then they see them struggling with basic things at school. There is a huge worry, because obviously, when parents send their kids off to school, they want them to have a good time. They want them to have successes. They don't want them to feel, that there's something wrong with them. So what would you suggest then to a parent who, say, is observing this happening with their child right now, and they're not quite sure what to do? What do you normally say for them? Like, what's the pathway that you would normally suggest?
So to me, I think you need to look at the symptoms of, because there are symptoms of dyslexia, or there's like problems that are so identify what the main kind of concern is at the time, and then like focus on that. And then once you are able to focus on that, because a lot of times I think with dyslexics, we'll have one overarching thing that's just so all encompassing that it's kind of hard to get to the other things, and you can't really. So for me, I struggled so much with my words moving and with being completely overwhelmed by the light and things, that we really couldn't get to what my strengths were, because I was so overwhelmed with like the struggles of that. And so I think that you address things that are like the most pressing first. And then when you kind of get those under control, because dyslexia is not overcomable. Like, you just have to find ways of coping with things. So if you have, for me, it was like, I was completely overwhelmed. I constantly had headaches. And so once we got that under control, then we could start looking at the other things. So then my parents could help me start, like, okay, she has headaches. She has headaches because she doesn't really know how to use her eyes when she reads, or she has these. So then we could systematically start addressing like the little underlying issues that were kind of overwhelming me. And so I would say that with parents or anyone that has a loved one that's dealing with dyslexia, like, find the one thing that is most pressing, find a solution for that, and then you'll be able to kind of like start peeling away the onion and find that like the little tiny little supports that you put in place to help.
I think one of the things that I've sort of understood over the years that I've been working with this as well is how little mainstream class teachers actually know about dyslexia. And yet it's like, it could be up to 20% of the classroom could be struggling. Yeah. I mean, and as you said, everyone presents differently. So there's a continuum. It's not a black and white thing. Yeah. So those who are mild, normally they kind of fall through the cracks, don't they? Like, but and those who are really severe, but then you've got the double, like, you are twice exceptional. So you are exceptionally bright and then exceptionally bad at spelling. So you've got that really spiky profile. And I think a lot of times people go, oh, you just need to work harder. You just need to just put a bit more effort into your spelling. Because you're obviously bright, you're obviously capable. And it's like, I think, so what would you say to teachers then who are, in a mainstream class and who are spotting these kids and going, what is going on with these kids? Like, what am I supposed to do?
Well, one, I have to commend teachers. I was speaking to teachers a couple weeks ago about this topic, and I told them, I was like, 1 in 5 people are dyslexic or now, like 1 in 5 typically. And so if you're looking just like an average class size of 30, 6 of your kids in your class could be dyslexic. 6.
Yeah.
Like it's huge.
And each of them are different.
Yeah. Each of them present differently. So for teachers who already have such a huge task, I think what has worked really well with me in teaching, period, like what you do for dyslexics, you do for any other student as well. And so that individualized attention, so reading in small groups, figuring out what I always say, like, what is their currency? Like what really makes them, what makes them thrive. Each kid has a different currency. I think for me, if I go back and look at the way that we were taught, like in school, we never were taught in like small groups, small reading groups. So like just the way that teaching happens now, so small group instruction and level books and a phonemic approach to reading, all of those things already are going to be something that helps students with dyslexia. Because we learn better if we're like multi-sensory learning or we're learning in small groups. And so I think you find that currency, but you ask those questions of students, like, typically a student knows what they're struggling with. I can't spell that word, or I can't hear that sound, or I can't remember what words, like what order I need to put my letters in, and then find what works for them to help them find success. I always say with any students, I was never in special education. I never had to be. But a lot of students are. But you still need to find the individualized plans or individualized pathway for any student for their learning. And so I always say that what you would do in any student that's struggling or missing benchmarks, you would do the same for dyslexic students. So just find what are those niche things that they're struggling with, and then put an intervention in place for them accordingly. With teachers in general, though, I would really appeal to schools and to school districts and to educational providers, like give teachers just a basic understanding of what dyslexia is and what can they be looking out for, because teachers don't know. I was trying to find a statistic on the percentage of teachers who have had any form of training on dyslexia or neurodivergence. I mean, even like autism. I never had any real training on how do I support my students with autism or Asperger's or what have you. Less than 2% of teachers are getting training.
I asked ChatGPT the other day. Before the conference on the TeacherCon on Saturday, and it was 74% around the world, basically, because obviously they were kind of evening it out, of teachers in mainstream classes haven't got a clue. They literally have had no training, and they have no. And then if you're thinking 75% of those teachers, and they've got 1 in 5 kids, it's like, well, hang on a minute, this is kind of crazy.
Absolutely. Listen, I must have put the wrong prompts in the ChatGPT, because they were like, it basically was like, I don't know. I can't help you figure out what that percentage is.
Joy. It's like, I'm out of here, Joy.
That is hilarious.
But then also, like, I think that there is so much to be said about dispelling myths about dyslexia. Like even starting there. Yes. And speaking of, I was so mad at myself on Sunday, still kind of mad at myself about it. There was a individual at the event that I went to on Sunday. Now, literally an event for dyslexia awareness with parents who were coming and asking questions about dyslexia. And he found out that I was dyslexic. And the first thing he said to me was like, how many fingers am I holding up? Do you see 2 of me? And I'm looking at him like, and I was so angry. And I'm just like, Joy,
confused. What?
Yes, I was so mad.
Do they think you've had a few drinks? Is that what
I don't know what he was thinking. And at first I was so confused. And so I was like, what? And then he was just like, well, you're dyslexic, so you can like see and I was like, oh God, the ignorance. And so I was just in my mind like, Joy, don't be American and like pop off at this poor man.
Keep yourself in your space.
Maybe keep yourself classy. And so I said, I was like, that is such a horrible misconception about dyslexia. So I kept it cool. And then I was taking pictures later on, and the same man, like there was multiple people taking pictures, and the people who were having their pictures taken were like, which camera are we looking at? And he looks back up again and was like, well, she's dyslexic, so she can see. And I'm like, and I looked at him and I was like, it's not funny. It's not funny. And so
I'm so confused though what he was actually believing about.
I don't.
I'm so like, I don't understand what he was even thinking. Like, that's so
and his
weird.
wife was like, what? I honestly don't know what he was thinking either. But it made me realize that just because of like the history of dyslexia, and we can even talk about that if you want, but there's so many misconceptions that people have these weird ideas in their head about what dyslexia is. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm thinking, if you heard that someone had, I mean, dyslexia, I can't help that I have it. I can't get rid of it. Like if you heard that someone had cancer or had epilepsy,
type 1 or something like that.
Yes, like you wouldn't make fun of it.
Fun. Yeah.
Like it wouldn't be something that you joke about. And I'm thinking, like, I'm a 46-year-old woman, like, and that still really hurt my feelings. So thinking about students who are dealing with this, like day in or day out, like it's so one thing that I would love to do is just kind of like dispelling myths, like
and children of parents, if the parent has got this misconception and their child
yes
is struggling,
I don't even want to think of that.
I don't even want to think about that either. That's pretty disturbing, actually. So go ahead. What would you say were your top myths to dispel?
That dyslexics read backwards. Like it drives me up the wall, or that they flip their letters. Now some do. Some dyslexics do flip their letters, or they, their letters look like haloed or blurry. That happens. But it's such a huge misconception. And then it's also developmentally appropriate for certain students to be flipping. So for instance, I had a mother who came to me crying, my child is dyslexic. And I said, why do you think your child is dyslexic? Now, this is a 5-year-old child, just started reading. And she was like, well, he reverses all of his D's and his P's and his Q's. And I'm like, that is completely developmentally appropriate. So, and we set our kids up. We completely set our kids up for this. And this is my literacy specialist brain talking. So like, for instance, for your entire life, from the time you're born, your mother or your father gives you an object, and that object is that object regardless of which way they present it to you. So this is my mouse for my computer, and it's my mouse this way, and this is still a mouse, and this is still a mouse. It's always going to be a mouse. And then they get to school and you tell them, well, this is a B, but if you flip it this way, then it's a D. And if you flip it the other way, then it's a P and it's a Q. Or this is the letter 3, but if you flip it that way, it looks like an E. Like their brain has to make those neural pathways to understand that now we have symbols that are all very similar, but they move in different directions. And then when they move in different directions, they have a different sound that's associated with them. It's a setup, but it has no indication that your child is dyslexic.
I'm going to tell you
that is my biggest.
I'm going to tell you a story because I think it's so pertinent. So Olive Hickmott, who's the lady who taught me about the dyslexia work, who's dyslexic, and she was in a shop and they had these like wooden letters, the alphabet. And she was like, oh, I'm going to get these. So she's like, I'm going to get a B. And she put it on her finger. She's like, I'm going to get a D. And she put it on her finger. And then she goes, I'm going to get a P. I'm going to get a Q. And she went, oh, they're all the same.
They're all the same. It's so hard. And so that's my number one. And I mean, I can't tell you how many even like dyslexia organizations that I work with worldwide that they use that as a screener for. It is literally appropriate for your child to flip their letters until around age 7 or 8.
I was going to say, but then there must be like a point where you're like, okay, so if they're still doing it, we need to address this. So around so 7, the prefrontal cortex kind of really kicks in terms of logic and process and everything else. So you want to be looking around 7 or 8 to see.
And even and it could even be a little bit further than that. But when I would tell parents to be concerned is if you point this out to your child and then they're still not able to make that correction, then that's something that maybe you might want to be concerned about. So it's okay for them to flip it. But if you're asking them to look at it, like, does that look right? Or you give them like different visualizations that they can do to remember which way the letter goes. If they can't do it after you put different interventions in place to help them do that, then you're concerned. But if it's literally just flipping, then that's fine. My other misconception that just really upsets me is that like you just need to try harder. Like you just need to work a little bit harder. You just need to need to put in more effort. The effort that if I had to go back and think about what the effort that I had to put into just to keep my words from moving on the page when I was younger, like, can you imagine? My words literally, I'll have to see if I can write what my words would look. My words would scramble on the page.
There is a book. Have you seen the book?
Yeah, the Reading by the Colors book it's called the Reading by Colors. It has like different
it's all the different things. It could be a swirl, it can be, as you said, kind of falling off the page. It can be like the lines between the words are black.
Yes.
So it's like these channels kind of. I actually feel sick when I was looking at the book. I actually started to feel nauseous because my eyes were obviously impacting. And so you can understand then how you can end up feeling really like you don't want to look at them. You don't look at it because it makes you feel unwell.
It's horrible. So if I just think of the things that people would say, like, well, just try harder. I was doing everything I could to try to, like, the effort that I was putting in to try to just be normal, not even read. The effort that I had to put in just to kind of be normal, like my friends at school, was so much. And then to actually have someone say that you aren't working hard, it's like, it's traumatizing. It's like I'm writing a book right now about my kind of journey with dyslexia, and it's been so traumatizing just kind of reading the stories. One of the stories I remember is like in 5th grade, my teacher said that I had to stay back after school because I was so far behind in my work. And I was actually kind of happy that she was like going to, like, I was going to get to stay after school and like she was gonna help me. And I remember we had our friends, where our school was, like, it was a big field, and then Kevin Simpson's house was on the corner. He had a trampoline. He had 2 trampolines. So I could see all my friends jumping on the trampoline. Oh, and then I'm sitting in this, and the teacher literally brought a pile of work and was like, you need to finish this. Went and started like grading papers and gave me no help. And I'm sitting there like, I was really excited. Like, she's going to help me. Like, I'm going to be able to catch up. I'm not going to feel horrible about not having my work done. And I remember I was so angry because I was like, my sister left me and walked home, and like, I'm here by myself. Like, my parents know that I'm here, and they're like letting me be here with this woman who's not helping me. And I was so I don't even know what the word is, just like completely depleted by the time I left. And I remember walking home feeling horrible because I thought I was going to get help and she didn't help me. And I was in the same place where I was before. And it just, like, I think that even made me spiral a little bit more. I'm even getting emotional when I'm thinking about it because it was so difficult just to kind of catch up. Tried to, like, I didn't want to be a bad student. I didn't want to be behind. I didn't want to not do my homework. I didn't want any of those things. And I was literally just seen as like a bad student, someone who was lazy. Like, if I had $1 for every single time someone called me lazy growing up as a dyslexic child, like, I'd be a millionaire. And it's so hard to get past like the shame of that. Like, it's really difficult. Even now, like, there's people need to do better.
There you go. I was about to say, they need to be actually focusing on themselves, but you clearly have overcome a lot of significant challenges in your life. So my question would be, how has resilience and perseverance helped you to actually reach your goals? Because you obviously had your own goals. So
yeah.
What helped you most to reach your goals with everything that was happening in your life?
So I definitely have had parents and siblings and family who just saw like the brilliance of me. Like I was never made to feel like I was dumb. I was I was always celebrated. Like my parents were tough on me. Like I remember I told my dad one time, like he had too high of expectations. I was really upset. Like I told him, I was like, my sister's name is Jennifer. I was like, you expect me to be able to do the same things that Jennifer does, and I can't do that. Like I can't. And he was looking at me. He looked at me. My father was very just said it how it was. And he said, "Do you really think I'm going to have lower expectations than your sister?" And I was like, "Yes, because I'm not as smart as her." And he was like, "You're as smart as she is." Like, he was like, "I'm never going to lower my expectations of you." He was like, it would be a crime for me to lower my expectations. He's like, "I have the same expectations of you and I always will." He's like, "But what I don't expect for you to do is to get to the finish line in the same way that your sister does."
Wow.
Like what you are going to, he's like, "I'm never going to lessen my expectations, but the way that you get there is going to be different, and that's perfectly fine."
Wow, you sound like you had literally the perfect parents.
I had really good parents, but honestly, my mom's probably on here. I think that my mom, if you're say hi in the comments. But I think that my parents really did. I think that my father had guilt until the day he died about like the way that he handled everything with my dyslexia. Or just my schooling and all. And I'm sure that my mom probably has some guilt about that as well. They absolutely shouldn't. They literally did everything that they could. I did not want for anything, and I'm very blessed in that. In that, so a lot of people can't access the testing and the glasses and the therapies and the things that my parents were able to do for me. And so I'm blessed in that way. But I think that that's not even what made me successful. I mean, yeah, getting my glasses made me successful, but or helped. It was a tool to help me. But my family was very much like, you are who you are. You are who you are. You're perfectly fine. Did I give them hell? I'm surprised I survived my teenage years. I'm surprised any of us survived my teenage years. But my parents and my family have always celebrated me, have always told me that I could do it, would sit there and cry along with me when I was frustrated. I think another thing is that I just have friends who are very supportive even now. When I struggle with things, I struggle with dyslexia every single day. I'm not going to say that it's completely easy. It can be very hard, but I have to remind myself that I'm kind of a little bit exceptional. I'm a little bit of a badass. If I'm gonna be like, there's been a lot that I've had to overcome, but I think that the grit that you have to have when you're dyslexic or neurodivergent, just helps you to kind of push yourself to be better.
And look where you are today. You know, you're an absolute expert on the topic. Can you tell us a little bit more about your work with Buckner Education? I think people would love to hear a little bit about that as well.
Yeah. So so I think a lot of people become teachers because they had an inspirational teacher that they wanted to be like. I became a teacher because of my first grade teacher, who shall remain nameless, but the woman terrorized me. First grade was really when I started trying to have difficulties. And I just really looked back and said, I want to be the kind of teacher that I really needed in my years growing up. And it's what drove me to be a teacher. But now, after years in the classroom, I really wanted to shape the way we train teachers and the experience that we give to teachers. And so a lot of the work that I do now, I'm actually seeing one of my coworkers, Svetlana, is on. Hi, Svetlana. I do a lot of teacher training on teacher innovation and school improvement and teaching for effective learning. So lots of coaching and going in and working with teachers and saying like, this is what you're really like, this is your strengths. So like, look at some of the strengths that you have and let's use those strengths to pull up some of the areas where you can improve or have some development. So I do a lot of teacher training, teacher innovation. I work with students sometimes, not often, but I work with teachers, but just a lot of work with that. And I love working with literacy. When I moved to the UA, so in the States, it's shifting now, but the way that they teach reading in the UK is like, I love it. So like taking a phonemic awareness approach. And so I've been developing like phonics lessons for like the last 4 years to kind of integrate fun play-based things that we would do in the States and merge those with the way that you would like look at letters and sounds in the UK. And so I do a lot of training on literacy and phonics and how do you make reading fun and multisensory, and then how do you tie in the science of reading so that you can really appeal to students regardless of their levels or if they're neurodivergent, because dyslexics do really well with like multi-sensory approach to learning reading. So yeah, day in and day out, you will see me training teachers or doing webinars or going in and doing observations. And I absolutely just love it.
That sounds amazing. What a journey. What a journey. Can I ask you, what advice would you give adults that's going through strugglings around dyslexia or any other learning disability, not disabilities, but differences rather?
Talk about it. Talk
Amen,
about it.
Sister. Yes.
Honestly, talk about it.
Yes.
And I think that one thing that is so difficult with any type of like learning difference is that people are so reluctant to talk about like what they're struggling with. And I think that because we don't talk about things, then those misconceptions continue. People feel okay to make fun of people with dyslexia or dyscalculia or any other.
The uneducated stays uneducated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think that talking to people and finding other examples of people who have the same condition makes it more humanized and makes people say like, okay, like Joy's severely dyslexic. It hasn't held her back. Or who else is dyslexic? I remember I was watching when growing up the Cosby Show. You loved the Cosby Show, and Malcolm Jamal Warner on the Cosby Show that played Theo. Like there was a whole episode about him being dyslexic, and I was just like, oh my god, like he's dyslexic. It's okay. And like you meet people all the time that like they're like, oh my god, you're dyslexic. I'm like, yeah, because we hide it. And there's nothing wrong with it, but people don't talk about it. Like my mission now, like in the months to come, in the years to come, is to talk about dyslexia as much as I can to normalize saying like, we have this. Like if you look at the major companies in this world, Facebook and Virgin Radio and Twitter, was not called Twitter anymore. Most of the people that run those companies are dyslexic or have some sort of neurodivergence. We think different ways. We're revolutionary, we're innovative. And so I just think that opening up the world to people who are neurodivergent and making it not seem like something that's a negative. It's actually why I wanted to say that this talk was the joy of neurodivergence, because it's a joyful thing. And it's not just my name. I mean, yeah, we're playing on my name, but I really do find joy in the fact that I am dyslexic. I don't see it as a bad thing. And I want other people, and you shouldn't. You should see it as a gift. Just like
think about Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein had dyslexia, and nobody, I don't think a lot of people even know that.
No. So, and yeah, I mean,
you don't hear people
pretty much every invention, every discovery, if you look at the person who, great artist or songwriters, or, you keep going through all of those amazing, people, majority of them will be on the spectrum, definitely, 100%, because to be able to think outside the box, you have to have a brain that doesn't like constraints and doesn't operate in that kind of linear step-by-step sort of, within the parameters that are known. It's like, no, let's go out and let's blow those parameters wide open.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of I think that if we
everyone's on
everyone's on the spectrum.
Is everybody? We're all neurodivergent, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's fine. Like, and I want people. So I think that's what I really want to do, is just, if there's any advice to anyone, it would be talk about it. And then also to say that, like, all of us have a different journey. We're all going to come and to discover like our neurodivergence in different ways. Like, we're not cookie cutter. It's not going to be cut and dry. You're going to have to work to see what works for you, but to push through and not give up on it. When I met Sara the first time, I was talking to her, and she was like, what is your, like, how does your, I don't even know what the question was to Sara. You were just like, what does your dyslexia do? It was something like this. Like, how does it present itself?
I normally say,
how do you do
I always ask, how do you do your dyslexia?
Yeah.
How do you do it?
No one no, I don't. I think that you might have been the first one to ask me that. And so I had to kind of think about it. Like, what does my dyslexia do? I mean, it definitely presents where I just don't process things quickly. I can, like, I read, I was working on a project the other, like an interview, and they wanted me to do a task, and they were like, okay, we're going to give you this thing, you get to read it, and then find a solution in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And I was in my mind, I'm like, oh my God. Because typically it would take me that long to kind of read it and figure it out. And I just had to work around it and figure out, like, okay, Joy, you have to read this, and then you have to understand it. And so I literally was like reading it to myself out loud so I can hear it. Like, you find the little tricks in what your mind does. So I just think that people asking me, like, what does your, like, how does it present yourself? What does your words look like? What is, like,
what's happening?
Making us like, think about it helps.
Yeah. What's going on inside your mind? Because, once you think, that metacognition part is absolutely crucial, I think. Like, I love asking those questions, because most of the time people who have been struggling have all those assumptions being made about them. Yeah. They've been called, I mean, I'll just tell you a very quick story. I presented at a conference in Australia in 2016. And before I went over, the lady who was the organizer, she said to Oliver and me, she said, would you two do like a webinar to kind of get people excited about, jump starting? And we were like, yeah, of course. So we did a webinar. It was called, why phonics, doesn't always work, and how to help the struggling 20%. Yeah. And this woman in Australia, this teacher in Australia, I don't think she actually listened to the webinar. She just saw the title, and she was arguing with us about the percentage. And she was like, there's no way it's 20%. And we were like, but we've done the research and we have the evidence. So I was sending her, the research that's where we got the number from and everything else. And this thing went on for days, this argument with this teacher. And finally, I had to leave the conversation, because what she said to me was, okay, well, all right, fine. But phonics is still the only way to teach reading and writing. And there's nothing wrong with good old fashioned hard work.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. I saw.
And how long had she been teaching? How long had she been teaching?
Quite some time, by the sounds of it.
So
I just saw red.
Hundreds of students. Yeah. Hundreds of students that she was just not helping.
Just dismissing, just completely, the wrong impression. And it took me about 2 days. And I said to Paula, my partner, I said, you're going to have to virtually hold me back from getting into this fight and wanting to kind of punch this woman up. Because I said, the families I've worked with, no one could be working harder than those children and those parents, and particularly the moms who are the ones who typically sit down to do the homework. Yeah. I was like, they can't be working any harder. This is not about hard work. That's a crazy idea, because I've never met a student who doesn't want to succeed. No, never met anyone. Everyone wants to succeed, of course, And
in what other situation would it be okay to just be like, well, just try harder? Like, I honestly don't. It's like, I don't know, if you're talking with, like, if I had a student who had a speech impediment or stutter or something, and I'm just looking at them like, but try harder.
Come on, you can do it.
You can do it. Just like really try hard. Try not to stutter. Try not to like. People would think that it's abuse. But to go to a neurodivergent and be like, but just don't do that, or just figure it out. Like, it's abusive. And it causes so much. I think the major thing, if I'm going to look at, and it's what I kind of want to help avoid, or help other people to help avoid, and to people who are neurodivergent, like, to kind of help them get past it. Like, the shame of growing up in this way and having this is really difficult. Like, if I'm going to look at like any of the lasting impact, like, I don't care about my dyslexia. That doesn't bother me. I'm happy with it. But like, I have to tell myself, even with all of my accolades and what I've done and what I've accomplished, I literally have to tell myself about 50 times a day that I'm not stupid, that I'm not lazy, that I'm a hard worker. Like, I physically have to say, if you look around my room, like, I'm looking at a sign right now that I have on next to my desk that says, "You're worth it. You've always been worth it, and you'll forever be worth it." Because I literally have to tell myself all throughout the day, like, it's my biggest like mental block, that I'm not dumb. And it's because I was constantly told I have a genius level IQ. I do. And I still have to tell myself that I'm not stupid, because so many people told me that growing up. And so I just want, if there's another thing that I want to be lasting, and that's with parents who told me that I was great and that I was smart and that I was my parents didn't really believe in being smart. They believed in being a hard worker.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
They didn't care about grades. They wanted me like, they're like, "Joy, if you get a C, I don't care if you really worked hard. If you get an A and it was easy, we don't care about that." Yeah. So I grew up in an environment where that was stress, where hard work was stress. And I still literally have to remind myself every single day that I'm not stupid, because of all of the programming that I had to the contrary. And so I think that's what's really difficult about growing up this way.
Yeah, and it's not a disability; it's just a different way of thinking. Yeah. And I think it's once you embrace that, I think your future is just so different.
Yeah, and we need to change that narrative in schools too, like, because everyone looks at it as a disability, a learning disability.
Uneducated. That's why.
Yeah.
It's actually classified. It's actually classified in the UK as a disability. Like, it's part of the Disability Act. It was classified, because it's something that is a barrier, et cetera. But I think definitely language is so important. I think the terminology around it, I think the education around it is so important. Joy, we are nearly at our 1 hour mark. Janine, here we are yet again. We've had an hour. It's always so fascinating. We could be here all night talking to Joy. It is a joy. It's a joy to have Joy.
I don't know if I succeeded, but I really hope that I'm an example of like what dyslexia looks like.
Oh no, I think you are a shining example, and I just think
What an example to have.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Listen, I just also want to say thank you to is it Slevnana and Elizabeth, and is it Kinton? Sorry if I said it wrong, but thank you so much for being part of the podcast. Really loving that you supporting.
And Elizabeth, did you say Elizabeth? I know she had a great story there, but her husband he's dyslexic, and he would run his finger under the line as if pretending to read.
I did that too. Oh, Elizabeth, please tell your parents, your husband, that I did the exact same thing. I would read my books and look really interested and wasn't reading a word.
Oh my goodness, Joy! So absolutely, pardon the pun. A joy to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and what you've been through and where you are today. It's an absolute inspiration.
Oh no, thank you. And I just listen, I just want to invite, if any parents need just to lift me up or pick me up or advice, anyone's welcome to reach out to me. You can just either find me on LinkedIn under Joy Buckner, or
we're gonna put your details underneath the video. Don't worry, it'll be underneath the video.
Yeah, so reach out to me. If I can't help, then I'm sure that I can find someone that can help you. But that's one thing I want to also take away, that there's lots of support and help for people with dyslexia. But I think the major hurdle is just talking about it and viewing it from an aspect of this is a gift, not a what would be the opposite of a gift?
A curse, I guess. Curse, a downfall. Yeah, a curse.
Yeah, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a gift and it's a joy. And I wouldn't want to not be dyslexic.
Well, Joy, amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Janine, as always, amazing co-host. So we just like to remind people that, if you'd like to support our work, we have a Buy Me a Coffee link. So that'll be underneath the video as well. We really appreciate any help you can give us because this is our passion project. Mm-hmm. And you can see all our other podcasts on our website, womenwise.media. And if you feel that you are a wise woman and you're empowering and you would like to share your story with other women, you can also get in touch with us about coming on the podcast. I think there's nothing more for us to say apart from have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. This was fun.
Talk about it and be kind to yourself.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.